Do you ever feel hopeless, facing a sea of faces barely younger than my own? The question came from a student in the university class I was speaking to. I could hear my own doubt and fears reflected back in those words. In my darker moments, it has sometimes felt like the darkness has already won. If you were to ask me about my life story in bullet form, it might be easy to imagine that I don't see much good in the world. The daughter of a chronically ill parent that I cared for during childhood. The weight of nearly losing a sibling when I was 14. The secret of my own queerness that I kept hidden for many years because I saw no place for myself in the world I'd grown up in. But if you imagined that I don't see much good in the world, you'd be wrong. On resumes, I list one of my core competencies as relentless optimism. I use these two words because I've yet to find a shorter way to describe my near obsession with the belief that the light will always conquer the darkness and that good will always win. As a child, I devoured every book I could get my hands on. Stories of good versus darkness, David slaying Goliath, Frodo carrying the burden of evil and temptation, Sam sacrificing it all, willing to lay his life down for a friend. I carried a seed of hope wrapped up in the petals of my heart, a bone-deep knowledge that no matter what darkness stood against us, the light would break through. When I was young, I believed that the goodness in the world came from outside of people, that it was there for us to find, but only if we believed the right things in the right ways. Goodness came from following the rules. You could tell what was good and light by seeing what kind of fruit someone's life bore. At the age of 7, my family returned from missionary work in South America. We returned to Canada because of health concerns, no money to our names, my parents lacking recent work experience, no foundation on which to protect our young family. I can still remember the gnawing fear that we would end up homeless. Strangers that my dad had met at a small diner in our town gave my parents $10,000 to bridge the gap. I was told that because these strangers believed the same way that we did, that they were able to be the light in the darkness that had threatened my family. Moments like these repeated themselves over the years. There would be a crisis, a moment of need, and people would appear to fill in the gaps. Sometimes it was my family filling in those gaps for others. The image of my father pressing a wad of cash into the hands of someone who needed it more than our family is still burnt into my memory. But I had a secret I was afraid would ruin everything. A secret so big that I would no longer be on the side of the light and I would be left behind. I was gay. When I was young, I believed the light would win because I believed the right things. Coming out felt like losing gravity. Suddenly, the rules and the right way of doing things that had held me down and gave me stability were gone. I began to view the ways I'd once thought of as good as wrong and even evil. Coming out opened my eyes to pain and marginalization in the world I'd been blind to previously. I found myself in cold basements, on the boards of nonprofits, standing in the blowing snow, yelling into megaphones beside others fighting the darkness they saw in the world. I had new words for the darkness now. Words like racism, transphobia, bigotry, and greed. While the language and surface of my life looked different than before, I still believed the light would win if I could just get everyone to believe the right things. The right things had just changed. I still believed the light would always win, but only because the right people were fighting in the right way. The right way looked like approaching a local LGBTQ nonprofit and asking if I could volunteer. I was told that there were no seats on their board at the moment, but was I at all interested in the juxtaposition of queerness and faith? The board was exploring holding a conference to bridge the gaps between the queer and faith communities in our city, and so I found myself in church, sitting in a circle of strangers saying that, yes, I would organize and produce a collection of performances by those whose stories of queerness and faith clashed, coexisted, and existed in the same space. 3 weeks later, my wife and I sat in a coffee shop as I began to plan the event in which my old and new lives were threatening to collide. The coffee shop was crowded, and at the table just inches from us sat a young person in deep conversation with a gentleman in a clerical collar. A woman even shorter than me was pushing her way through the tables to come say hello to the table beside us. She was wearing a clerical collar of her own under a heavy knit gray sweater. She told the table beside us about a group of students that met for supper each week to explore what it meant for the light to beat the darkness in our complicated world. I interrupted and asked if there was space at the table for 2 more. Without missing a beat, she smiled at me as if I were the only one in the room and said, "Of course." 3 years later, and I still believe that the light will always conquer the darkness and that good will always win. I have found myself returning to the language of my childhood because I have found that no other language so perfectly expresses my belief that nothing is beyond redemption. I have led 3 groups of strangers through the process of refining and sharing their stories of identity in the midst of faith. Some have found bold beauty in walking away. Others find hope and the strength to love themselves as they are, with the faith they only hold tighter. Some, like me, defy the definitions we were taught during childhood, slipping in and out of the boxes we had previously inhabited, more interested in what we learn in the leaving and coming back again than in inhabiting any one room or space. I am learning that perhaps my relentless belief of good in the world has not changed all that much over the years. That goodness exists and light wins, not because the people who had given me hope had chosen the right side, but because we had chosen each other. The strangers who gave my family the money we needed to rebuild our lives. The Baptist pastor who spent the past few months emailing me letters of encouragement as I embarked on a new and terrifying adventure, even though I do not fit in the neat box of what we believe on his church's website. The woman in the clerical collar I now affectionately yell, "Hi, Mom!" to as my wife and I march in the Pride Parade each year. She always laughs and shakes her head and yells back that we should smile. She takes a picture with her camera. It will show up on Facebook later. Choosing others is not some sweet platitude. Like I was taught as a child, our ability to choose one another is a hard race to run. It takes real action and sacrifice. Sometimes I have found myself surrounded by others fighting beside me, megaphones in our hands, my voice becoming raw and rough with my prayer of, "No hate, no fear, refugees are welcome here." Other times, my ferocity of belief that we are capable of choosing each other has left me alone in dark spaces, forcing me to leave comfortable places behind. I am learning that perhaps who I have been and who I am now do not need to be at odds, that there is space for complexity and contradiction in the space between our clasped hands. My belief in good is the same, but different. Better, because I have found the way to find hope for my heart when it is hurting is to choose others, to work with the ones who are choosing others. Even if the words we use to describe the darkness are not the same, our hands can do the same work. I know that the dawn will always break. My help will always come. The light will pierce the darkness. And even if the darkness never understands why I am still raging, I know the light will never die because the hands that bring the light to the darkest paths are ours. I am still learning that I cannot wait for other hands or other arms to come. Ours are the hands that can break everything, but ours are also the hands that can build beautiful things. Thank you.